Hello, my name is Charlie Patterson. I'm 28 years old and I'm applying for a place on the foundation course at LSDA. I have a reasonable amount of experience in amateur and local theatre, but no kind of paid or professional acting experience. Um, I first began to get the impression that I wanted to be an actor when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And I decided to do drama for GCSE, mostly because my brother had done it. And I was quite sort of a shy and nervous and kind of chubby kid. So I was very surprised when my drama teacher decided to cast me as Macbeth in the production, the first sort of production that we were going to put on. And I just remember being feeling just really transformed and just getting up on stage and just feeling confident and feeling that in a weird kind of way it was sort of easier to be Macbeth than it was to be myself. I felt like I really understood the rules of performance. That in my normal social life, I was always struggling. I was always awkward. I never quite knew what to say, how to feel, how to behave. Like kind of how much space I should be taking up. But on the stage, all of that is sort of very clear. It's you and the audience and the performance that you have to give, and just having the rules set out like that. I remember that just being a really kind of definitive experience for me. And so I studied drama through GCSE, and then again at A level, and I got A stars in both. I always did quite well. Then I went to university and studied creative writing, but there was quite a lot of collaboration between the creative writing department and the drama department, especially in the last couple of years, where we did a lot of we studied a lot of dramaturgy and playwrights. We did Samuel Beckett, David Mamet, Dave Eggers, Harold Pinter, a lot of kind of contemporary playwrights and also kind of classic playwrights as well, like Shakespeare, for example. We always studied Shakespeare. And I remember we used to write and sort of produce radio plays for the university radio station, which I'm sure like kind of 6 or 7 people probably listen to. But I was also part of the drama society at university as well, and we put on quite uh, a lot of kind of quite fun and experimental productions. Actually, there was one that we did that always sort of springs to mind, which was we did a production about the 2002 Moscow theater hijacking, where a group of Chechnyan sort of terrorists or freedom fighters seized control of a theater mid-production in Moscow and took the audience hostage. And so we had a production where we began by putting on, some of the actors were on stage and they were sort of staging a production of a different play. And then those of us who were playing the terrorists, we came up out of the audience where we'd been sitting and we took the audience hostage. And it was sort of like making the audience into characters in the play, really. And I played Barriev. He was sort of the head sort of this the head terrorist, the leader of this organization. And he was quite an interesting character, actually. He was very young. He was only about 22. He died during the storming of the theater. And he viewed himself as a freedom fighter. He was trying to liberate Chechnya from Russian occupation. But at the same time, he was very ruthless, and he had to deal with a lot of the sort of the logistical problems of the situation. He had to find out which members of the audience were Russian nationals and which weren't, which ones needed medical attention, things like that. And that was a really fun performance, and there was just a lot of electricity in the air because the audience had this real feeling that they were part of the action, and we had actors amongst the audience as well, and we would pull them out and actually threaten them and give the audience the sense that any of them could be sort of pulled out at any moment, and that was a really great performance. Um, so I left university in 2015, and I always had I always at the back of my mind wanted to pursue acting as a profession, but I think life just kind of conspired to get in the way. My father died. I ended up moving abroad for a while to teach English, and moved around the UK a lot when I came back. And but I always stuck up. I kept up with sort of local theatre, amateur theatre, things like that. I played Professor Higgins in Pygmalion. the last production that I did as part of the Whitney Dramatic Society. We were producing a play called The Truth Fairies by Sally Kinnell, and it was an interesting play. It was sort of about a murder that took place in the 1970s, and the play was sort of divided into two parts, and part of it was set in the 1970s, part of it was set in the modern day, and it was the same characters 30 years apart. And I played sort of this. I played a hippie basically, just sort of kind of one of the sort of the better sort of well-meaning characters in the play that thought he was a great guitarist and actually wasn't. It was quite endearing. Yes, so so I've got a reasonable amount of I've been involved with various. So I was involved with the kind of the Cartwright Theatre group in Lancashire for a while, and I've been involved with a lot of kind of amateur theatre, but not a lot of I've not had any kind of professional experience in acting. My strengths as an actor, I would say I'm a hard worker. I'm definitely a hard worker. I've just spent the last 2 years working in care through the COVID pandemic, so working a lot of kind of 15-hour shifts and with terrible staffing problems. I'm quite imaginative and empathetic, I would say, and creative. I love. I'm a writer. I studied writing at university. I love creating characters, and I love getting into other people's heads, imagining their circumstances. I'm a good listener, and I think I'm fairly fearless on stage when I'm acting with other people. There's a sort of adrenaline that you get from that kind of energy of being with other people and being as part of a performance together. I struggle a little bit with, like, for example, this sort of situation, recording monologues at home. I get the sense that when it's just you in a room with a camera, it's quite hard to sort of summon up the same energy and the same kind of like heights of emotion, I suppose. It's also really hard not to be too self-critical as well. Whereas in live performance, you just got to kind of keep going and follow the momentum of that. I think in terms of weaknesses, I'd like to be less performative in my performances. I'm quite analytical when I approach sort of performance, and not as spontaneous as I like. I'm just reading. I'm reading Sanford Meisner's book at the moment, and it kind of reminds me a lot of studying Stanislavski when I was in college. It's sort of it's a lot about. I think he says living realistically in imaginary circumstances, and contriving to make the circumstances in which you're acting as realistic as possible to ensure that the performance that you give is realistic and comes from real emotions. And I sort of struggle with that a little bit. I can understand the character. I know exactly where the character is coming from. I know how they're feeling in that situation, but I end up performing those emotions rather than always feeling those emotions, and just like really being kind of in sync with the character emotionally, I suppose you could say. Sorry, I've got a list here of the topics to cover. I would say, who inspires me? In terms of acting, I would say probably my favorite actor is Gary Oldman. I think he's a real kind of chameleon. I don't think any other actor has got quite the range that he has. And he's got a brilliant ability to always sort of fit himself into kind of the tone of the performance of the production that he's putting on. And he can be very kind of like broad and sort of almost sort of melodramatic, like when he did Bram Stoker's Dracula, for example, which is sort of a Victorian melodrama, really. Or when he did Luc Besson, Leon the Professional. He can play like performances very, very sort of broad, but then at the same time, he's also able to be really kind of focused and understated and minimalist, like in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, for example. He's I kind of feel like he's every bit as talented as sort of a Daniel Day-Lewis, but not cold or withdrawn in any sort of way, in that slightly method actory way that Daniel Day-Lewis is, where you kind of get the sense that Gary Oldman really loves performance and loves kind of relishing in performance, which Daniel Day-Lewis maybe doesn't. I sort of feel. Yes, I'm sorry. I think that sorry, I've been blathering on a little bit here. But the two pieces that I'm going to provide are Hotspurs, My Liege I Did Deny No Prisoners from Henry IV, Part 1, and also Lenny's first monologue from Harold Pinter's The Homecoming. So I'm including those now. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I'm sorry for blathering on for so long.
My liege, I did deny no prisoners. But I remember when the fight was done, when I was dry with rage and extreme toil, and breathless and faint, and leaning upon my sword, came there a certain lord, neat and trimly dressed, fresh as a bridegroom, his chin new reaped showed like a stubble land at harvest home. He was perfumed like a milliner, and as the soldiers bore dead bodies by, he called them untaught knaves, unmannerly to bring so slovenly, unhandsome course betwixt the wind and his nobility. With many holiday and lady terms he questioned me, amongst the rest demanded my prisoners on your majesty's behalf, and I, all smarting with my wounds, being cold to be so pestered by a popinjay, out of grief and impatience, answered neglectingly, I know not what that he should or he should not, for it made me mad to see him shine so bright, and smell so sweet, and talk so like a wailing gentlewoman of guns and drums and wounds, God save the mark! And that the sovereignest thing on earth was parmacetti for an inward bruise, and how it was such a pity so it was that this villainous saltpeter should be dragged so from the bowels of the harmless earth, which many a good tall fellow had destroyed so cowardly, and that were it not for these vile guns, he would himself have been a soldier. This bald, disjointed chat of his, my liege, I answered indirectly, as I said, and I pray, let not his report come current for an accusation between my love and your high majesty.
One night, not too long ago, down by the docks, I was standing alone under this arch and watching the men jibbing the boom and playing around with the yard arm when a certain lady approached me with a certain proposal. And this lady had been searching for me for days. I mean, she'd lost track of my whereabouts, but in the end, she caught up with me and she made me this proposal. And this proposal was nothing out of the order, you know. I mean, normally I would have subscribed to it. I would have subscribed to it in the normal course of events. But the trouble was, she was falling apart with the pox. So I said no. But this lady was very insistent, and she started taking liberties with me under the arch. Liberties which by no criteria could I be expected to tolerate. So, the facts being what they were, I clumped her. And it did cross my mind at the time to do away with her, you know, to kill her. And the fact of the matter is, as killings go, it would have been a very simple thing. Because her chauffeur, the one who'd located me for her, he'd pop round the corner for a drink. And I was all alone with this lady under the arch, watching the steamer steaming up and no one around, and all quiet on the Western Front. And she was just standing there against the wall. Well, sliding slowly down the wall as a result of the blow that I'd given her, and to sum up, it was very much in my favour for a killing. Because don't worry about the chauffeur, because he would never have spoken, because he's an old friend of the family. But in the end, I thought, why go to the bother? You know, moving the corpse and putting yourself in that state of tension. So I gave her another belt on the nose and a couple more turns of the boot, and I left it at that. How did I know she was diseased? I decided that she was.